Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I'm excited to talk to my guest today. I don't have like a big story like I usually do. I really try to not go off on tangents. And I feel like I really have a lot lately because I just feel like the world is so depressing sometimes. And there's so much negative information and people attacking each other. And I'm at a point right now where I just want to throw my arms up in the air sometimes and cry because it just seems like we're just so at odds with each other in our country. And I just wish we could like meet in the middle and get to a place of understanding each other. And I just feel like it's a really sad time. So I hate to start off a podcast that way, but especially my guest is laughing, but I just think we need to be more patient and kind to each other. Like, and try to understand we're all different. Like we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different stories. If we would just like, I've said this before, hang out with somebody that's different than we are, or find out something about somebody that we don't really understand, the world would be much better, I think. But that's also coming from a place of being very Pollyanna, I think. I hope not. I have hope for us. I do. And for all my listeners across the other in other countries that listen, thank you so much for supporting and listening. I promise you, the United States is coming back. We're just going through like some crazy stuff right now, but we're still at the root of who we are. I think good people, caring people, and I would like to always believe that. Okay, that's my first thing. My second thing is, please, if you are so inclined, please leave me a quick review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. It helps new listeners find me. I would really, really appreciate it. It's super easy. You can go on the app. If you're listening on Apple, it takes 2 seconds. You scroll down, you subscribe to the right, and then you can scroll down. And I would like if you would leave me 5 stars. If you're not going to do that, don't do it. Just walk away from your phone, walk away from wherever you were going to. And that's about it. We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Today, I am very excited to introduce Paul Summers Jr. Do you go by Paul Summers Jr. or just Paul Summers?
Paul Summers is easier. I mean, my dad passed away about 4 years ago,
So you were the junior. I'm sorry to hear that. Paul is a recovering addict, sober since 2007. Congratulations. He's also a new author. He has the book that came out in April, A Dad's Journey from Soulless Addiction to Soul Custody. And he is also a talented musician. So I'm very honored to have you on the podcast today, Paul. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Meghan. Honored to be a part of the Judging Meghan podcast.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. So let's start with kind of like where you're from. I always ask my people that come on where they're from. It's easy. It's the greatest way to like get in touch with somebody. And by the way, if I'm kind of out of it this morning, poor Paul, I'm sorry. I'm just a little tired. I didn't sleep very well last night, but as we go along, I'm sure I'll ham it up. So tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
All right. Well, currently I'm in Portland, Vancouver area, and spring just started yesterday. So if I have to keep going, coughing
You
a
have
little
your
bit,
allergies.
the allergies, yeah, they just kicked in like 2 hours ago, I swear. So, but I'm from Las Vegas. I'm a born and raised Las Vegas, Nevada native, and ended up here in the Northwest in the mid 90s as a way to escape my addiction.
Las Vegas I've interviewed people from Vegas before. That would be a hard place to live if you were trying to deal with addiction issues. So it makes sense to me why you probably left. What is
Yeah.
it like for you being an American in Canada right now with my intro that I just started with?
Oh, well, I'm in the Washington version of Vancouver, so
Oh, you're in the,
uh,
so you're still in
yeah,
the States. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I I can't believe they put two cities with the same name within 200 miles of each other. I mean, that's
So is
so yeah,
this must be a mistake people make all the time. They think it's the
yeah,
same
oh yeah,
thing.
definitely,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So tell me a little bit because I always ask about people's childhoods because there's
yeah,
always some kind of connection, usually 9 times out of 10 between addiction and childhood experiences. So do you mind going
yeah.
into your childhood a little bit for my listeners?
Not at all. And I'll be honest, I've listened to some of your podcasts, and that is a question, and it is there is a common theme of trauma that occurs for a lot of kids, or adult that are adults now. It's divorce. I didn't go through that. My parents were married until they both passed. Um, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, one passed and the other one did, but uh, and but I would say the trauma for me probably occurred around a mom that uh, worked a lot and wasn't present as a sensitive artist kid. I think I needed that more than I got that.
Mhm.
And then a dad that was hard to call him an alcoholic because I've only seen him drunk a few times, but he drank every night and he was a rageaholic. So there was a lot of fear around that. My wife says for sure that's where the trauma came from. I don't know. That's a hard one for me to believe that that I can pinpoint that as like I can't think of you know any specific experiences, but I do remember being afraid for my life.
Yeah,
and
so
and
that's
see, I laugh.
trauma. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's trying,
trauma
and I
right
laugh about
there.
it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, isn't that cool? I got to be afraid. But yeah, I would say my dad was, he had that narcissism. I mean, everything centered around him. I don't know if that was just the '50s family unit, or if it was him. He was a very compelling, uh, charismatic. He was a singer, very talented. I mean, he didn't do it for a living. He raised his kids. He did the things he needed to do. He worked a lot of odd end jobs in Las Vegas to get by. Well, whereas my mom fell into a career right after I was born, and so it was a strange family to live in, having my mom be the breadwinner and my dad being the overarching authority on everything, including finances.
I wonder too if like because back then if you grew up in the 50s, that wasn't the norm obviously where the woman was the breadwinner. And I'm assuming a
Yeah,
lot of times men have a hard time with women having the power or the financial like financial purse, the financial strings. So that can cause anger in men, but this is me like probably over evaluating the situation. Just I was just curious about that, but everything you're saying kind of like does build the building blocks of like feeling isolated, feeling alone. This is all stuff like a lot of times when people come on and they're like, "No, it was totally normal childhood." Like my dad yelled at me and my mom left me alone. You're not saying that, but there's usually always layers to why addiction comes up later in life, if that makes sense. And I'm sure you know that.
yeah, that does make sense. And I would probably add that Las Vegas, a city of indulgence, and
Hmm.
also at that time, not a city for kids. The '60s, '70s, it wasn't what it is today. It was you had the gambling was the industry, the gaming, and so kids were to be not seen or heard kind of thing, and that was weird to see it change in the '80s and '90s into this America's place to play, and having
I've
all
never
these.
thought about that. I've never really
Yeah,
thought about that because Las Vegas is obviously like a newer city. I mean, now it's
Right,
been around,
right.
but like back then, when was it founded? Like, I don't even know the
It was
origins of it.
Yeah, it was founded around early 1900s. It was a Mormon uh, like outpost, and then there was a spring there. So the train, when they built the train line from L.A. to why? How do I know all this? From L.A. to Salt Lake City, it became a stop, and then the big making it become a small town was when they built Hoover Dam, and then the gambling, started up in the 50s, I believe,
Yeah.
and that was
So
what
it was
became.
like really a party place, a place where people went to gamble, all the celebrities, they started building the hotels.
Right.
Now, like you said, it really people move to Vegas, families. I've interviewed people, they're like, "No, it's like two separate places. If you live there, you just don't go." There's people
Yeah,
that
that's
just
true.
don't go to the strip. But
Yeah,
that's actually really sad to me that you guys, like, children were kind of like hidden away. I've
yeah,
never even
yeah,
thought about that could be a possibility and what that would have been like to grow up like that. Because people think Vegas, oh, how cool that is, kind of like
yeah,
LA, but LA is different. But I mean, I live in LA
yeah,
and we're known
yeah.
as like, how Sunset Strips, celebrities,
Right.
Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah,
So same kind of fast town. And if you do deal with addiction issues, I know people like from when I was an actress in my 20s and young that have left because they just couldn't be around it. So it makes sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there, it was, it's billed as entertainment capital of the world and all that. But for kids, as I got into the 80s, I got into the punk scene, and we had a
Mhm.
thriving underground punk scene in Las Vegas. And we would we would like take a generator and go 18 miles out into the desert and have freedom. We'd have bands that would play. A quick plug, real quick. The Las Vegas, there's a punk rock museum in Las Vegas now, and they dedicated a wall to the local Las Vegas scene from the 80s. And so my guitar is on display there from my punk bands. So that's a huge honor, to mention and pass along, that people from all over the world come to this museum now. It's been open for a little over a year, and but the camaraderie is still there. Like all the probably over 1,000 people are my Facebook friends from that era, and
I looked at your Facebook. It's really cool.
oh, thanks.
Let me get into the musical side of you. And
Okay,
because I get that. I talk to my listeners about how I grew up like singing and dancing and acting. And I always say that was kind of my escape in my
yeah,
traumatic childhood,
right.
was I would escape into like characters and sing and make up musicals. So I wonder, because you did bring up you were an artist from a very young age. Was
Right.
that kind of your escape and your place of like happiness, was like playing the guitar, playing an instrument? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. And Vegas at that time, it wasn't open to that. It was the place where the Rat Pack and the I mean, read an article. There was an article in Playboy in the '70s. It was Mitch Ryder of Mitch Ryder and Detroit Wheels, and he said he'll never play Vegas because that's where musicians go to or artists go to die. And that was,
Mhm.
and that's like the '70s. So that gives you an idea. It's not how it is today. It was so different back then. So anything original or artistic was really like frowned upon and treated poorly. It was, there were people that were very antagonistic against it. So when this, punk scene started evolving, uh, like I was saying, a lot of my friends on Facebook, like we remember that, like that's a bond between us. Is like it's not like that now. So much is open and freer. Thankfully,
Mhm.
as far as being an artist. But back then, it was something you were a little a little scared to. You didn't really want to walk down the streets of Vegas with a mohawk or colored hair or a shirt with a band like the Dead Kennedys or Black Flag. Or it was just It was something you
You were
worried
looked
about getting.
upon as you were looked upon as like oh, they're scary, that kind of thing. Did
Yeah,
you have that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then like scary as in let's go beat those guys up. They look different, or they're doing
Yeah.
something different. Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
So
mean, I'm
there's
a
definitely
child.
some.
I'm a child of the 80s, and I remember like 80s and 90s. I was little in the 80s, but I can remember like the punk rockers with the
Yeah,
mohawks and all that stuff. And they did have that kind of like stigma. I grew up on the East Coast, like preppy as you can be, like outside Washington D.C. And I do remember that. And so
yeah,
now it's so funny because you're right. It's kind of like taken such a shift where self-expression is really appreciated by people.
yeah,
I mean, there's still people
yeah,
that are like, why do you have purple hair? Or why are you walking down the street? But at least like the part of it that I think is important, that you'll leave a legacy of the guitar hanging in the museum or whatever it is like that was your form, that was your time of like self-expression. And there's nothing better than music to like kind
right.
of heal, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I'll add to that that like having that guitar hung like validates that
Yeah.
it was meaningful. Like it meant something to enough people that they put it in a museum, and not just my guitar. I mean, I'm just part of about 300 to 500 people that always showed up at. We had touring bands come through town all the time, and we had original bands that were really
Hmm.
great, and it's just that expression in that music. And we were anti-gaming and anti-government, and but some of the stuffs, and some people went on and have had long-lasting music careers, and but at that time it was so just like looked down upon. It's like I even had people. I started off in a rock band, and I embraced the punk scene and the movement because I saw that it was artistically a freer movement, and uh, there were people that were like, why are you doing this? Low grade, talentless. I mean, all the names it was called, but it was like, well,
Yeah.
because I'm an emotional being, it's my passion. Like I like passion in music, and I thrive on that.
I
So
love it. I
yeah,
think that's amazing, and it's such a great legacy to have, and yeah, the younger generation to like look up to that whole scene. But tell me,
yeah,
like, not to skip ahead, but in the music business, in that scene, drugs usually are pretty close behind, especially during that time. I don't know if you know Candy Finnegan. There was a show on A&E.
yeah, yeah.
What was it called? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Intervention.
yeah, intervention. And so she was on. I adore her. She's one of the most
Yeah,
interesting people I've ever talked to in my life, and funny, like so funny.
yeah,
So maybe listeners, if you're listening, go back. I think I re-released that episode pretty recently. But
yeah.
she was telling me that like moved to LA, like they were living in the like whole musician, like Laurel Canyon scene. Um,
Right.
David Crosby recently passed, was best friends with her husband. And she kind of talks about like that's where the bones of the addiction started for her. So I would love to
Yeah,
know your story. So why don't we
yeah. Well,
start
it was
there?
sure, and it was cool on your podcast. She had mentioned a whole bunch of things I weren't. So listen to that podcast because she's like an idol of mine as far as the show Intervention, and she had mentioned
She's
something on there
amazing.
where she said, she's like a pioneer of this movement,
Hmm.
and she had mentioned, she said, I think most of the people that watched the show in the early days were high while they were watching. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was me. I used to watch that show high and just dream about the day I could get clean, you know?
Mm.
So it was really cool. I didn't know she was married to, a musician. I didn't know any of that about her. So that was cool on on your podcast.
Yeah,
I learned
listen
a
to
lot of,
that. Yeah,
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 sure.
listen to the
Uh,
episode, but it is true though that she um and the other reason I really like Candy, and this is a side note and then I'll shut up, is there's people, I've talked about it a few times in the recovery space. that there's people in it for the wrong reasons. Like the majority of these
No,
places, it's all about money. Um,
right.
she
Yeah.
genuinely is in it for the right reasons. She genuinely wants to help people. So I love her even
And
more for that.
I'm glad that that was brought up because somebody with the amount of respect that she's earned, in the treatment realm to say that, and that even made me think. It's like this book, for example. The reason I wrote it was to help other addicts. I want to help other
Mhm.
addicts hear my story, know that there is hope. Um, and I mean that show, I still watch it. I go into tears probably every time I watch that show because, and the main reason is, and this is the people that I want to help the most are the families of addicts and alcoholics.
Mhm.
And you have this intervention, which everybody knows. Well, not everybody knows, but a lot of people know that an intervention doesn't always work. My first sponsor, they had pulled an intervention on him, and it just made him mad. You know, it just made him hide his addiction more. Um,
Mhm.
and so, there is truth to the addict's going to find their way to recovery when they want to find their way to recovery. I mean, that was the truth with me. But I would watch the show and I would start crying because there was always like 8 times out of 10, there was that one family member that you didn't think was going to have those key words that would get that person to go, okay, I'll do it. And you just know the pain they're going through. As a person that loves an addict, they're going through the pain. Um, in my story is that we didn't lose our like my daughter's mom is still out there, and so my wife at the time, she continued to use even after I got clean. Um, and so I watched, my own insanity really was before my eyes. So I know that pain. I know that pain of like losing somebody more and more and more each day. So I wanted to say that because like listening to your podcast with Candy, it brought up a lot of stuff for me, about that show and its importance in the recovery community. And so, all right, so I'll get back to
No, I love that you brought that up because it is the family piece of it is so important. And
yeah,
I
it
don't
is.
know what the statistic is of people that go through an intervention. I don't know what the latest statistic is of like how many are successful. I think I knew at one point and I've forgotten, but they're not always successful. And to touch on your
Yeah,
point, because it's like one of those things like you need to be ready. The person that's dealing with this disease is the one that needs to take charge and say enough and get clean. And nobody's going to
yeah,
do it for you. As no matter how
yeah,
much they love you, you know that. It's like one of the hardest things to do. And
yeah.
it's like one of those things in life where it's like all you and nobody else can help you. They can help you once you decide to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah. At that point, it's the admission that you're broken. You've
Yeah.
got to be okay with admitting I can't use any substance successfully. And I think that's the turning point. It's like, okay, all right, I'm broken. What do I do now? It's like you really, for me, that was what happened. I mean, my story is my then wife took off with our daughter, left, and disappeared. And um,
Yeah,
I
tell
mean,
me about that. So you got married like young, like how did you meet? Tell me a little bit about that if you're comfortable.
absolutely. So I and I'll do it like a segue here. Like music was a big thing in Vegas. I eventually got more and more into drugs. Um, and it got to where it was impairing my abilities to, show up on time, be,
Mhm.
be creative. and those are all the reasons I got into drugs, the party lifestyle. But I was actually aging too. I was in my early 30s, and I just felt like, this is going nowhere. Maybe if I move somewhere else, I'll be okay. So I moved to Portland, Oregon, and um, within 3 weeks, I found the meth dealer in my neighborhood. I
Mhm.
continued trying to make a living playing music, but the drug addiction just kept getting worse. I got into opioid addiction, and then I met my first wife at a part-time job that I had. She is 19 years younger than me, so I was about 40 when I had my daughter. She was 20, so right on. So yeah, and um, we were we got married, had a baby, got a house, working full time, and just got worse. We're both of us addicts at this point. Um, and I got to the point where I wanted to die. I called a suicide
Mhm.
hotline through my work, and they suggested inpatient treatment. And I said, "Well, I can't be away from my daughter. That's not going to work for me." So we always had a bond, me and her, very close. And they said, "Okay, well, how about outpatient?" So I did outpatient treatment. I was clean, but I drank, if that makes sense, um, for 60 days. Uh, I had also, during all those years of playing bars, I had stopped drinking for 12 years. I went back to drinking because I thought it would help me get off opioids. So here's a couple, addict
Mhm.
behaviors: substituting drugs, moving 1,000 miles away. These things didn't help, and uh, uh, and so it got to the point where I had told my daughter's mom. I just said to her, "Look, I don't think I can. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to stop. Uh, I'm ready to just go ahead and die an addict, but I want to make sure you carry the baton, and be a good parent, and love our daughter with everything you got. But could you get clean and before I die?" And she looked at me and she said, "Hell no." She said, "You've been partying for a long time. I'm just getting started." And the very next day, and I got so mad at that response, like, uh, no, you need to do, you need to do this for me, man, for our kid. Do it for our kid. Anyway, she, and the next day she did. I went to work. I came home. My apartment was empty. She disappeared with our kid. Uh, 2 days later, I was hit with a restraining order, which I had not been violent. I had been verbally assaultive. I don't know that's not even a word.
Yeah, verbally
I,
abusive.
abusive. That's the
Yeah.
word. Thank you. I
Not
had been bullied.
surprising when you're on drugs. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I hated myself so much.
Yeah.
I just um, and it. Her family just thought it was a good idea to use that as a tool to make sure I don't come around. I don't take our daughter and disappear back to Vegas. Um, but that day that she was gone, can I cuss on your show? I can't remember. Is
Oh,
it
I always do. Go for it. Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
totally fine.
Well, I mean, I came home from work. I noticed my place was empty. She was supposed to have had like we were supposed to have. We had a pill that we were supposed to split when I got home, an opiate, um, and I didn't know where she was, and she called, and I was like, "You need to get your ass here, or I'm going to kick your ass." Like I got real, puffed up and threatening. I got very
Mhm.
threatening, and which wasn't okay. I just want to make sure everyone knows that, like, that's something uh, that I'm not okay. That behavior was never okay, and that's what kind of person I was at that time. And she said, "You'll never see your kid ever again," and hung up. And that was the moment I looked at the four walls, and it's like, how many relationships have I lost? How many, bands have I like destroyed? Friendships, but I can't do this to my little girl. I just can't. I can't see her
Mhm.
growing up without a dad and being broken. Like, I know so many women that are broken because their dads aren't in their lives, the difficulty they have connecting, um, with a long-term relationship, because of these missing fathers, and I just like, I can't do that to her, and so in that moment, I just said to myself, okay, uh, I can either call my dealer or I can go to a meeting, because when I was in outpatient treatment, they sent me in the direction of 12-step programs, and I haven't looked back since. I mean, that'll be 17 years next month, so God willing, with God's grace.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
I wonder
thank
though
you.
too, like it's I mean, it's a story that, just your bravery in talking about this and writing the book. And, you know, something I know you must know, Paul, is like we all, I mean, I'm very spiritual. I don't know if you are.
Yeah.
And I think
Oh
that
yeah.
part of life is, this is my opinion. I talk about it a lot. Life is about a series of tests. This is what I think. And like
Okay.
we take those tests and we go through really hard things, and we're here for such a limited short time. And if you're somebody like you or me that has contemplated not wanting to be on the planet anymore, and then for
Yeah.
some reason you wake up, for me, it was my kids. I'm a mom. I grew up without, I lost my dad at 13. And I was like, that
Oh
was my reason for being like, okay, like I got to be here for them. I don't want them to not have a mom. Like I didn't have a
yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
So when you were at that point of being like, being so sick of choosing drugs over life, it
Everything.
was like
Yeah.
basically like, I'm going to end my life, everything. Um, it's because you're sick. And part of the piece of addiction is, I mean, what these drugs do, I'm assuming, you said meth. What else were you using? Like Coke, I'm like all of that kind of stuff.
A lot of things. Opioids and meth
Hmm.
were the two favorites,
Yeah.
I suppose. And as I
So
said,
but that,
I
like, as you know, that all messes
oops,
with your brain chemistry and your brain, and
oh yeah,
like the rage and the anger and all those things. So as you know, since you've gotten clean all these years, that people can change. We all make
oh yeah,
mistakes. And I
yeah,
think you should be highly like commended for choosing your child and getting clean over the alternative. But the
yeah.
alternative was, in all honesty, also not your fault because you were sick and you were in that much pain. So I
Okay,
just wanted to point that little piece out.
yeah. Well, thank you. I will add on that I don't think anybody gets high for the first time and says, "Oh man, I want to be an alcoholic," or a drug addict.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a slow
Yeah.
progression. Um, into behaviors that become repeated enough to get those well-worn neural pathways. It's like these behaviors start to just get sicker and sicker, and they repeat familiarity, and so I totally agree with you. Like I definitely know I was sick. One thing that scares me a lot now is just drugs like fentanyl. um,
Mm.
one bad dose and you're gone, and these are young people, especially, that I'm concerned about, that they're not even would be. I don't know what the classification of an addict though, but I think of addiction as a disease, and it's a disease that something like fentanyl doesn't even give you the chance to survive. It's like, um, gosh, I think it was on your show where Candy might have said, uh, like 1 in 4. It's not, like you have like a year long sentence. I mean, like within 4 years, somebody that becomes a regular fentanyl user, they're gone. And that's
Not to
horrifying.
mention
So,
these pills. I mean, I've interviewed
yeah,
like multiple people that have lost their children to a fentanyl
so hard.
overdose, thinking they're buying
Yeah,
something else, like a sleeping pill
right.
over Snapchat or whatever it is, and then they wake up. They don't wake up. So,
Right.
I talk a lot about the mental health crisis and homelessness and all the things that we deal with in our country. And at the root of addiction is mental health. So if we could get to a place where we're educating our kids in schools more about, I just had an interview with someone and I talked about how this should be a subject in school. Like, I think, talking about like addiction, talking about bullying, we just really
Yeah,
need to focus more on those things. So when, as kids get older, they're kind of set up for the worst. And I know we're taking a turn, but you're a parent too. I have young kids. I have a 10 and a 14-year-old. And I talk a lot about like, social media and phones and how they're destroying our kids, but also just like the drugs that are out there are not the same as like
no,
smoking pot and the things that like
no,
I had growing up, I mean,
yeah,
when I would go out to parties and bars in college, it was like the guys all drank beer and all my friends and I drank like Zima and Boone's. And then every once in a while in college, like I would see like, like some guy that I knew was doing drugs, but I was like, oh, he's a pothead. Or when I moved to LA, I really saw a lot of that, in my 20s. But it wasn't the same that it is now. Like now it's
no,
terrifying. And
yeah.
what
I
these
mean,
cartels
pot's
are
not even
doing, bringing into our country, it's like a whole thing that like really people need to wake up and take care of more so than anything else. I talk about it a lot.
yeah, yeah. I mean, pot's not even pot anymore. It's so strengthened, and studies are finally coming out about how addictive it is, and that was like one of the drugs we were
Mhm.
told for the longest time. It's the gateway, but it's not that addictive. And it's like I always argued that point. I'm like, most people I know that are daily pot users, you try to take them off it for one day, and they're a mess. And I mean, I don't, I don't know that that
This is all
defines addiction,
stuff
but
that messes yeah, it messes with your brain chemistry, period.
yeah,
So let's
yeah,
go. I know we kind of like veered, and that was my bit. I talk about being a big mouth all the time. Yes, I am. I like to get on my pulpit and I
that's
need to
good.
get down sometimes. Um, but I did want to talk about like, so when you finally got clean, so what happened with your ex-wife and your daughter? Like, how did you end up getting custody? Like, tell me about that piece. And I think that's such an amazing thing too, because just to like want to live and be a dad and like want to live for your child. I love that. I think that's such a beautiful piece. I don't know where your daughter is today and how close you are, but she must be pretty proud of you.
Well, yeah, I'll go into all that. So I'll just you. Here's the book. Uh, so that's the content of the most of the content of the book. I read a lot of recovery memoirs. A lot of them spend a lot of time on the mess. I didn't want to spend too much time on the mess, but I wanted to make sure that people could identify with the sort of monster that I was.
Mhm.
And uh, we should have had our daughter taken away. And then this event occurs, and so the main part of the story is from that event happening to my first year birthday of being clean and sober. So it is the story of going from, I think my original ideas in my sick brain were like, well, I'm going to get clean. I'm going to get my daughter back, and that'll show her. It was more like vengeful spirited. Um, uh, I didn't everything. So I had tried so many times to get clean, so many times to be sober. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it on my own. Couldn't do it with some help. I couldn't do it till I was ready to do it. So now I'm ready to do it, but I don't know
Mhm.
that I can do it. I mean, that's the thing. Is like day by day. You don't know. I don't. I didn't know. I definitely didn't know 17 years ago, uh, which was right before I got clean. 17 years ago this month, I didn't know that I have written a memoir, raised my kid mostly by myself, I didn't know that that was all possible. I was just trying to get through each day, and that's what I did. I got through, that one day at a time. That's the truth. And so I didn't even get to see my daughter for. I got to see her one time. Uh, I told you there was a restraining order. We went to see the judge, and the in the situation that happened. Um, I hired a lawyer, and my ex-wife didn't hire a lawyer. We both showed up for the restraining order, and uh, the trial the hearing got postponed till after my daughter's fourth birthday. And her mom, raised her hand at the judge and said, "Well, that's going to be after our daughter's birthday, and she's really going to want to see her dad." And the judge, just gave this puzzled face, like, "Man, you wrote all these horrific things. You wrote right here that you and your daughter are afraid for your lives from this man. Uh, and so now you're saying, what, you want him to see her though, or her to see him? Were you lying when you made the restraining order up?" And she didn't know what to say. And there's a lot I can speak to on that. That whole process. I firmly believe in restraining orders. Um, I don't believe they should be used as a tool, especially to separate parents from each other, from their kids. And
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that's what was the impetus for change, in that the judge granted me the ability to see my daughter on her birthday. So it was about 6 weeks that I only got to see her one time, and that was because my parents had come to town, and they were really close with my daughter's grandparents, so my then wife's parents. So they facilitated us to see each other, and it's part of the title "Hide and Seek" is when I think my daughter was so flooded with emotion when she got to see me that she hid from me, and I turned it into a game. I was like, "Lola, are you here?" And she would giggle, but I couldn't imagine, like, what she had heard about me, uh, what that was like to feel that as a 4 year.
Yeah, you had been separated for a full year, right?
No, not a full year, for a few weeks. It felt like a year.
Oh, okay. Okay, I
Yeah,
was confused by that piece. So, but also when you have a parent, that's bad mouth, like they're so young, they don't understand what's going on. And this is used so much in divorce and separation that one parent tries to alienate the other parent, like the child against the parent. So awful
yeah,
for these kids, because then they
yeah,
end they themselves are destroyed because of that behavior by a parent, you know?
yeah, yep. They internalize that pain, that feeling of fault.
Mhm.
Fault. They feel like it's their fault, and so going from there, what I started doing. So I got to start seeing my daughter. It was like a couple or being with my daughter a couple days a week. I was so happy to have her back in our apartment. Uh, for sleep in her own room again. And as this is happening, her mom just keeps making mistakes. Like, well, okay, I'll call them mistakes. She keeps, showing up late for pickup, um, showing up late over at the maternal parents' house, to watch her own
Mhm.
daughter. And eventually, I went to court to get a protective order, and an emergency protective order, because my daughter kept saying, she's hanging out with so and so, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's our old drug dealer. Like, why is she still doing these things that were okay when I was doing them, right?" So I had to, like, look at,
Yeah.
you know like, okay, I'm not okay with this behavior anymore. Should I be tolerant of it though? And it's like, oh, what if something bad happens though? Like, is she making mistakes? And unfortunately, my daughter she got harmed on her mom's watch, and the state got involved at that point. Finally, there was already a case pending with Child Protective Services, but there was an event, and it's in this is in the story. I don't want to give too much of it away, where the state awarded me sole custody at that point because of our daughter being harmed. Um, that was when I had about 11 months clean. So not long after that, I celebrated my 1 year, and yeah. And so our relationship, and a lot of people ask this because this isn't in the book. So I'm thinking about writing maybe a
Mhm.
epilogue or sequel even. Uh, um, so I ended up raising her by myself until she was 13, and then I got remarried. I have two stepkids. Lola is now 20, and she just had a kid, so I'm a grandpa. And her husband
Oh,
is in recovery.
congratulations.
He's young, but he's in recovery. So it's a family thing. She is not. Lola is not. Well, we don't know. Like, because she's 20, she's going to be 21 this year. Doesn't seem to have any issues with drugs or alcohol. So I'm pretty happy about that. But I would imagine like what she saw growing up would be a deterrent at the same time. And then as far as her mother, she has come in and out of her life, but never for any consistent amount of time. I've definitely never badmouthed her. It was hard to write this memoir. Um, the hardest part was actually doing. Well, I don't know about the hardest part, but I recently recorded the audiobook and speaking like the parts.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, there were quite a few times recording and I was in tears, just like reliving, the pain of, nobody gets married wanting to get divorced. Nobody has kids hoping that, oh, just one of us will raise, it's all the things like the dreams that got shattered along the way. And, uh, my part in it and owning my part in it. Um, and yeah,
It's
I don't have,
sorry, it's so normal though to like, I mean, I wrote a chapter in a book and I'm working on my own book, which I joke will
oh,
never
good.
come out because I really have to sit down and relive those things. And
Right.
it's really painful and hard. But
Yeah.
something that you said about like the addiction cycle of it like being in your family. I'm assuming Lola is in like therapy or she's been able to like deal with that stuff because I think it's so important for that piece of it to like the therapy part to be involved because then that cycle has a chance of stopping and not repeating, you know? And I
Yeah.
also want to say I think it's so brave that it's not easy to be a man raising a kid by themselves and
It's not,
that's really a difficult
we don't
piece,
have the
you know?
networking. We don't have the networking single moms have, I mean, we could do a
Yeah.
whole nother thing, mental health of men who don't seek mental health, like I don't think, I mean,
Oh, I
I,
talk about it all the time, Paul.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
whenever I have men
Well,
that come on, I mean that's
yeah,
that's like why men have the highest suicide rates and it is
right.
because they don't talk about like women we're talkers. We'll be like sitting
Yeah,
going out to dinner with friends and we'll just sit there and be like this is what's going on. Men are like let's talk about football and like surface stuff.
right.
Whereas
Totally. We don't
that's
connect.
great.
Yeah.
You don't
No.
have like the mean man. Like girls are mean and catty and do mean things to each other. But
That's
men
true.
are just kind of like, you don't like someone, you might punch him in the face and then you're fine.
Right.
But are you really
Yeah.
fine? You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I think, possibly because of the left brain or artist part of me, I'm more, feminine in, making those
Mm-hmm.
connections. I learned early on, I better start uh, following and watching what the single moms in recovery are doing, and I would network with them,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, I'm in some men's Facebook groups and yeah, they just live in that angry world. And, uh, it's hard to get through. It's like, connect, man, connect, like reach out. It's not so
No, I
bad.
think I love that you brought it up, the right brain part of it, because I've said this before. We're really lucky as artists, and like I'm musical too. I was a singer,
Yeah.
that we are able to get in touch with that piece, and men especially artists. That the hard part is for right brain people is we're a lot of times more inclined to be addicts. I don't know if you know that,
Yeah.
but that's just like the artistic part of us, like some
Yeah.
of the best artists and painters and, you know, actors and musicians, they've all died of addiction or,
Yeah.
whatever
Oh,
it
yeah.
be. But at the end of the day, it's because they're so passionate, and I think it's important and great that you are able to connect and, you tried so hard to connect with these single moms. I think that's great. Your daughter must be really proud of you.
She is. I'd rather her tell you that than me. But you mentioned therapy for her, and she refused. I tried to get her a couple different times into therapy, and just
Mhm.
no place for it. I also wanted to say, like, I've never had hard feelings against her mom. What she did actually saved my life. It wasn't the best way to go
Mhm.
about it, but I don't think there was any other way to go about it. And so I'm grateful to her that that she created an event that changed my life. And so no ill will towards her. And Yeah, I don't know. Like their relationship, they don't have one right now. I've always tried to, like, Lola came with me to meetings for, the first 10 years of her life as she was becoming, as she, got into her preteen years when she finally was like, I don't want to, I don't want to go anywhere my dad is or what.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so she has like that part of the program, instilled into her, like the sharing of what's going on with people. I think she's got a really good grasp of addiction, but I like you, just hearing the story and bringing up that concern of like, you know, I hope that she finds answers. I hope she finds someone that helps her to find
Maybe
answers, because
she's just not ready.
I don't think she's ready. I
Maybe
think you're
she's
totally
just
right.
not ready. You never know. I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of obvious stuff there with the mom and,
Yeah.
her childhood, but it's never too late. I mean, I recently went back to do EMDR. I think I talked about this in the last episode, which is a kind of therapy where you talk about
Yeah.
a traumatic experience. I don't know if you're familiar. And I
I
truly like am obsessed with it. I'm going to continue doing it because I mean, I'm not 20, I'm old, and I feel like we
Yeah.
all can continue to work on ourselves and get past our trauma. So it's really never too late. Um, Paul, I just think what you've done and like your story is so admirable. I think it's going to, for my listeners, help so many men out there that might be struggling, or a lot of my listeners are women, and maybe they can, if they're dealing with somebody that's not dealing, if they're married or dating someone or whatever it is that's dealing with addiction, I think your story is really inspirational. Can you
I hope.
tell my listeners where they can find you and your book?
Yes, I can. And if you don't mind, I want to touch something you started on at the very beginning. The tension that we're all feeling, and the at odds that like society seems to be enduring right now. Um, uh, I really think that understanding each other more, it's easy to like take a perceptive and just stick to it stubbornly, and that's not working for any of us. So I just ask,
Mm-mm.
like, breathe, take a step back, look and see what other people are doing in situations. Like, these are all little things that we could do. I did something. Twitter, I used to get like crazy on there, like crazy, and uh, I decided to not respond to anything. And I'm just reading. And after that was in February, and now I don't want anything to do with it. Like, I can see now that all it was doing was getting those endorphins popping.
It doesn't help you so I'm guilty of this as well. But I never was on Twitter, and especially not now, but I was on, I'm on Instagram, and I see these things and I can't help it. I mean, I have piped in the past, and then
Yeah, same.
I've gotten attacked, and then it's ruined my whole day. It's like people hide behind their keyboards and aren't afraid to say anything. And I almost commented on something the other day, and then I just am like, what is this going to accomplish? I still do it occasionally if it's something that like is very upsetting or something. I will. I don't care if you're going to come attack me because I'm stating something is not okay. But I think that you have the secret there is people need to take a step away from like Twitter, all of these things, because it's just making things worse and adding additional fuel onto the fire.
Yeah, I think we need to get back to in the United States. America is the melting pot. It's like the blending of all of us and our cultures and our differences, and it's separated from that. And anyway, so paulsummersjr.com is my website. So that's Paul Summers, spelled like summertime, JR instead of the word junior.com. And that will take you to where you can either get an autographed copy of the book or to the Amazon link. Soon the link will be to everywhere the book is available. And then I'm on Facebook under my name, and Instagram also. Those are probably the main places I hang out. But there is also a Paul Summers Chronicles YouTube channel, and you'll see a lot of the fun things that I do with my daughter Lola, and as well as a bunch of the music from my past. So
and the cool pictures. Like I saw those cool pictures. Yeah. Paul, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was so great to meet you today. In closing, everyone, I just want you to know, we've talked about throughout this podcast, and I've talked about a lot, there's always hope. Like, let's keep going. Let's keep talking to each other. Get off your Twitter. Get off the Instagram. Like, it doesn't accomplish anything for you or the person. You're not going to change anybody's mind. Like, that's what I've learned. Like, people are set in their ways. If you commenting and saying something is not going to, it's just going to fire somebody up even more, and you accomplish nothing by it. So in closing, keep going. You matter. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just want to say thank you so much, Meghan, for having me on. You know, you set the table. It's like we just ran into each other at this coffee shop, and I really don't want to stop talking to you, but I know we're up against the time. So thank you for having me as a guest. I think it's great what you're doing, and it's definitely helping the community out. So.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me, Paul. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. In closing, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thanks, Paul.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.